Welcome to the Naked Party Time podcast, where we get real and raw about life, leadership, and love,
while having lots of fun along the way.
So what do you say? Are you ready to get naked?
Let's do it.
We made way too much money to have no money. That's what our special guest, Joe Sangl, is going to share with us in a video here in a moment. But for now, my name is Jeff Manis. I am your host today for the Naked Party Time podcast. My co-host, Sabrina, will be joining us just a moment on video with Joe as well. We had a great opportunity to sit down with Joe Sangl, founder and president of I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, just a few weeks ago, and interviewed him. He gave us some gracious amounts of his time, and we get to air that for you today. Joe is by far the best communicator on the planet when it comes to winning with money and finding financial freedom. And that line, "We made way too much money to have no money," he shares as a part of his story of when he started his journey to financial freedom. So we're titling this podcast episode number 8, Get Fired Up, because that's probably the line that Joe says most often in his life and in his leadership. And I promise you, once you hear from Joe today, you're going to be fired up as well. We do have a sponsor for today's podcast, and the sponsor is me and the Israel trip that we're going to be doing coming up in March of 2022. So I know it sounds like a long way away, but March 28th to April 7th, I'm going to be leading an 11-day tour in Israel. We're going to walk where Jesus walked. We're going to see places where Jesus raised people from the dead, walked on the water. We're going to go to the empty tomb and all over Israel. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And on my website, jeffmanis.com today, you can get all the information you need for that trip. You might be asking, are people even traveling to Israel? Well, I asked the owner of Faith-Based Expeditions, who is the company we're going through, how many trips they have planned for next year. There's 43 scheduled trips on the docket in 2021, and we're not going to go until 2022. So you have plenty of time to save up your money to go. It does cost a lot, but I promise you, if you go to Israel with us, it's going to be an amazing trip that will change your faith forever. And there's not a better podcast to introduce our trip to Israel than this financial podcast with Joe Sangl, because I think if you implement the tips and tools that he shares, you'll be able to save the money to go on this trip with us to Israel. So I don't want to waste any more of your time. I can't wait for you to hear from Joe. Sabrina and I had just an amazing time sitting down with him, hearing from him, learning from his wisdom, the years of experience he has. And I know that you're going to get fired up when you hear from Joe Sangl. So enjoy our interview with the president of I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, Joe Sangl. Well, hey, everybody there watching with us on YouTube and anybody who's listening on a podcast. We're here with our great friend, Joe Sangl, joining us on the Naked Party Time podcast, where we're going to get real and raw about finances today, Joe. So thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you doing this.
You know, I think I love the name of the podcast. Yeah. I'm also uncomfortable and it's really odd. But I think it's a good description of when people start talking about their money, they literally feel naked and exposed.
Yeah.
That's what we want to do on the podcast. We like to be real about where we're at, the things we've struggled with, things we're currently struggling with, but also we want to have fun and give some hope along the way. And you've been someone that's given us a lot of hope personally. We've had a blast hanging out with you here in South Carolina. So if you guys don't know, we're in South Carolina recording this with Joe, and he was gracious to have us in. We're doing some work with him, and we're on the Monday Money Tip podcast, which was fantastic. But we appreciate you taking some time to answer some of our questions and hopefully give some encouragement to our listeners as well. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I would actually love to hear from you. What was your I have had enough moment financially when you just said, I'm never going back to that way again. I'm going to live a financially free life. What was that?
Yeah, and I think it's important to unpack. Like I call it an IHHE moment, an I have had enough moment. And we all know what that is when we think about when our mama had enough. You know, when mama had enough or when daddy had enough, things changed. Yeah. Like there was a special tone in their voice, or the belt was coming through the belt. I grew up in that household, and that was bad. But that I have had enough moment. There's some people that are just natural born savers. They don't really have that. So I think when you're speaking to that, it's somebody who's been financially misbehaving. They're usually a spender.
Yeah.
And that's me.
Yeah.
And so I had to have that. And for me, it's very distinct, very clear. And it was December 2nd of 2002.
Wow, you have a date.
I have the date.
That's awesome.
And that date, I grew up just south of Indianapolis, Indiana. I had moved to South Carolina in 1998 with a job transfer. I was a couple years out of college, had moved down here to make circuit boards. Very exciting. Shortly after I got here, they started moving to China, as everything did. Yeah. The 500 people lost their jobs a couple years after that due to exporting it all to China. And I moved to another manufacturing facility that was in Columbia, South Carolina. So I'd lived here in the upstate of South Carolina for 3.5 years, moved to Columbia, the capital, which is a couple hours away, and was there for about 11 months. I say I was there for 30 years, one 11-month period, because we were further from home. We had helped start a church here in the upstate. And so we decided to move back near home. My wife she's the oldest of 6 kids. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. So all of her brothers and sisters are turning teenagers, and we're like, hey, we want to be near them. Yeah. So we moved up there, and it was northern Indiana where we finally got the job that we wanted to go to. And it was December 2nd, and we're moving from South Carolina where there's palm trees, beautiful weather. Yeah. That previous year, I'd been picking out my Christmas tree around December 2nd in shorts and sunglasses. Wow. And I'm now, December 2nd, 2002, it's 8 degrees.
Oh, my goodness.
8 inches of snow to greet me on the ground, living in a hotel, waiting until we can find a house. Wow. And even though I'd known for a year I was leaving that employer, I forgot a fundamental fact that when you leave an employer, they're not too inclined to pay you anymore. I forgot that. And so here I am. I've got a new employer. I don't know when I'm getting paid by them. Wow. I know the old one's not paying me. Christmas is in December that year. And here we are using the credit card to run up to buy stuff for our kids, our family on a credit card. And something in me just snapped. And I just said, I'm not living this way anymore. Yeah. And I gave myself the pep talk. We make way too much money to have no money. Yeah. Like, this is an embarrassment. Yeah. And so I went and I bought some books. I'd had somebody rambling about of some person who'd helped them with their finances, and it was a brother of mine. And I was like, I remembered that it was odd that he had been saying that somebody was helping him with their money. And I finally just called him up. I didn't remember his name. I knew my brother's name, so I called him, and he's like, oh, yeah, it was Dave Ramsey. Oh, my so word. I bought a book that was released back in 2000 called Financial Peace Revisited. Wow. To me, that's the greatest book he's written yet. Wow. It's an updated version of Financial Peace, the first book he wrote. And he had some success stories in it, provided a roadmap, but more than anything, he provided the kick in the seat to say, you got to do this. Yeah. And that was my moment. Yeah,
that's awesome. So did you have do you have credit card debt, card debt?
At that moment, I had multiple credit cards of debt. I had truck debt. Okay. I had car debt. I had student loan debt. Okay. And I had just finished paying off mom and dad debt. Wow. Because my dad had helped pay for college, but he made me sign a promissory note to repay him with a witness. Wow. Which, you think that's a little weird, but he was really teaching me contract law, that it's important to have a witness and you're going to sign a contract. And I didn't do this for the other 5. I'm not doing it for you alone. And so I sat there and I had these 4 debts staring at me, lots of debt. Yeah. And I just said, I know it seems huge, but if I don't get started now, and there was something in me that I realized something. And I'm so grateful. Some people don't have this realization all their life, but I had it at 28. I was 28 years old. That I'm always going to have problems in life. Always. Yeah. In this life, you will have trouble. Yep. But I think one of the things of depression is we have the same problem and it just stays there for 20, 30, 40 years and we never beat it. Yeah. And I said, I know I'm going to have problems. I would at least like the name of the problem to change. So I'm going to try my best to make this money problem go away.
That's awesome.
And so that's what awesome. It did.
And what was your debt freedom date then? Because
So I calculated it, said if we do this and we say no to new debt, and we changed our lifestyle. We redirect the tax refunds that we were getting to savings and to paying off debt, that we could be debt free if we really buckled down in 19 months.
Wow.
19 months.
And how long did it take you?
It took us 14 months.
That's awesome, man.
Because there's an energy when you get closer. You're willing to sacrifice even more, aren't you?
When you get close. That's awesome. So on the podcast, as we started with, we like to be real about what we're currently struggling with, and this is a question I think is great for you because it seems people can view someone like you that has been so successful in their financial freedom as, well, now they don't ever make mistakes. Mm-hmm. I can never be Joe Sangl because they don't ever make mistakes. So what is the most recent financial mistake you've made, or just something that you regret financially, the most recent thing that you can think of?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I think this is going to be a deep answer.
Yeah,
I think.
let's go ahead.
If I believe that the greatest gift God has given me, the greatest gift, is the appetite, an insatiable appetite to be a continual learner.
That's awesome.
So I do not view failures as failures.
That's good.
And I do not view mistakes as mistakes. I view them as an opportunity to learn more about myself. And I've been grateful that the greatest gift God has given me that's not in me is my bride, Jen.
Yeah.
And it has she also has that appetite to learn.
That's awesome.
And so we have made mistakes that have lost money.
Yeah.
I think probably the most costly on a piece of paper right now is I dove into buying into the stock market before it hit the bottom during the coronavirus pandemic outbreak.
So while it was really
so
high,
I moved in a large pile of money.
At its record high.
Not at the record high, as
close.
It was going down.
Okay.
It was already rattling down.
But not
and I'm like,
at the
man,
bottom.
it has already went down a lot. It's went down to like 24,000 points. We're going to shut down for 15 days, but that's only 15 days. And we're going to be back out on the road in 20 days. And so I moved money in, a lot of it. And I didn't move it all, but I moved a lot. And then it went down to 19,000. Yeah. And I am grateful I did buy some more that day, but I had already put probably 80% of my gunpowder, I guess, in. And so I, on paper, suffered some pretty catastrophic, 15, 20% losses. Yeah. The great news is there's been a great recovery, and now we're up. Yeah. And I think that's just something that I just am reminded again. You cannot time things correctly. Yeah. And Warren Buffett is somebody that I listen to a lot. The Oracle of Omaha, one of the wealthiest people ever, 89 years old and still going strong, and a great investor. He says, I don't try to time the market. In fact, he's pointed to a study of like guppies, little guppy fish, that they had them blow bubbles. And if they blew one bubble or two bubbles, that made a decision of not to buy or sell a stock. Whoa. And like 50% of the time, they beat financial advisors.
That's hilarious.
When you're trying to time stuff. So timing, you can't. People with more degrees than the thermometer can't time it. So who am I to think I can? Yep. So what I've found is I continue to move money in slowly but surely, and as a result, we've come out net to the gain.
I think it's good. It's important to note too, even for those who are watching or listening, that because of how you've positioned yourself financially, even what we would term maybe a mistake or losing money, you have greater freedom to risk. Yes. Because you've set yourself up to be financially free. Absolutely. That even if the market didn't recover, you would be sad about that lost income, but it wouldn't negatively affect your livelihood. That's right. At this point.
And,
so that's good.
And wouldn't affect my ability to retire. Yeah. And I think that's a great thing is diversification, is making sure all your stuff isn't in one thing. And when I say not in just one thing, a lot of people are diversified, but within the stock market. Yeah. Their 401k is all they have. Yeah. And so when the whole market goes down, even great company stocks are dragged down. Yep. But that's why I'm invested in real estate. It's why I'm invested in small business. It's why I'm in raw land, that type of stuff, because I want to have a diversified portfolio.
It's good. It's good.
It's really good.
So you mentioned being a continual learner, and that's the next question. What have you learned most recently about money management, budgeting? Just what's something new you've learned recently or that you want to share?
Well, I think the thing I'm going to share is a nuance, but it's really important. There's different types of retirement accounts, and one of them is a Roth IRA versus a regular IRA. Yep. And the regular IRA is you get to use the tax dollars right now. You get to deduct it from your taxes. You get to use the government's money. But at retirement, you're going to pay taxes. And the Roth IRA allows you to pay the taxes now. And at retirement, you don't have to pay taxes. Right. And here's the real important nuance. And I know somebody might be listening to have $4, but they probably have a little bit of a retirement account. Yeah. And this is really important. At age 72 now, you have to take something called RMDs, required minimum distributions.
You have to pull money out.
you have to pull money out of stuff that has not been taxed yet.
Oh, wow.
So the Roth IRA money does not have to be touched.
Wow.
And one of the big losses that you have once you're retired is you lose a lot of your tax advantage places to invest.
Yeah.
So if you have money in Roth IRAs and you're allowed to leave it there, that can be the last money you ever touch. And you get maybe 8 years till you're age 80 if the Lord allows, or 90.
Yeah.
You can have 18 years and it never ever gets taxed.
Whoa.
And you and I both know if you get to keep that extra 20% of tax, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
But here's a nuance I learned. There's a hidden IRA that's available to many people. And it is something called the health savings account that is attached to high deductible health plans, which many people have.
Yeah.
And an HSA, you can take the money that's saved in the health savings account. I'm not talking about the healthcare reimbursement account where you have to use it or lose it each year. But the HSA is money you can invest. You can actually invest it. I use HSA Bank. They're a partnership with TD Ameritrade. You can invest that money. And at age 65, that money is no longer required to be used for medical expenses.
That's crazy.
And you can put in there this year nearly $7,000 in there for a family. And it's tax-free. You get to deduct it from your taxes today, which you can't do with a Roth. And as long as you leave your hands off of it till you're 65, it's tax-free then, and it's not subject to required minimum distributions.
That's incredible.
So for those people, think about this. I want people who's listening to think about, imagine with me, if you're debt-free on everything, including your house.
Yeah.
Throw the house, it's gone.
Yeah.
You have $2,000, $3,000 a month freed up for the average family, right?
Yeah.
So think about that. You could max out your 401k.
Yeah.
Max out your Roth IRA
and max
out your HSA, and it's an extra $7,000 a year. Whoa. And what if it took you 10 years to get there? Let's say it took you 10 years to get there, to pay off your house, pay off all your debt. 10 more years, and you're listening today and you're 40, and now you're 50.
Yep.
And you have an HSA. You could put in $7,000 a year
for
15 years. Yeah. That's $105,000. That's with
no growth. Not counting the interest.
Not counting interest, and it's tax-free on the input side, on the takeout side, and it's not subject to required minimum distributions. I know that is like it's like a wealthy person or a I'm winning with money person issue, but that's my latest thing that I've learned that makes me get fired up. And that I just want to speak to the people listening to the podcast. This is why it's so important to be a continual learner and to pay attention to money, because the laws of the land change.
Yes.
And if you don't know, it's like the game of Monopoly. There's rules, and what you don't know can cost you.
That's awesome. I didn't know that either, so now we learned something new. That's great. So talk to the person who is overwhelmed kind of with debt, not living on a budget, but they want to start. Like that person who has only $4 and credit card debt and all that stuff. Where do they start?
I think it starts with something my friend Casey Graham said it so well back in the day, and it wasn't related to this, but it's related to this idea of discipline. He said, you have to decide to decide. There has to be a moment where you just throw it down and say, today is the day.
Yeah.
It's not tomorrow.
Yeah.
I read recently a friend posted this, a pastor, that said that the cost of procrastination is not necessarily that you delayed doing something. The greater cost of procrastination is the fact that you didn't do it when you could have.
Wow.
And you may never get the opportunity again.
Wow.
And so I think that's really important to think about here is you have to decide to decide. Yeah. I can't decide for you, Jeff. You and Sabrina cannot decide.
Yep.
You can't. We can't. We want it for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
We hear the old statement: you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. We want it for our kids. We want it for our family members. We want it for the people we meet, our friends. Yep. But you have to want it for you, and you have to decide that today's the day.
Yeah.
And you have to throw all the excuses out of the window.
Yeah.
Because here's what I've learned. See if this is true. When you make excuses, I don't make enough money.
Yep.
I don't make as much money as they do.
Yeah.
I have these expenses. Yep. My car kept breaking down.
Yeah.
I had to buy a new car.
Yeah.
All these excuses, whatever they might be. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you are allowing yourself to assume the role of victim.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
And I'm telling you, when you play the role of victim, name a person who plays the role of victim and wins.
Yeah.
And there are people who have been victims.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Victims of horrible things,
Yes.
financially and otherwise.
Yeah.
Who are the ones that we think of that inspire us? It's the ones who decided to decide that thing, those events, they're not going to define me.
They won't define who I am.
I refuse to allow that to define me. They decided to decide.
Yeah.
And every day they have to decide to decide. It's a new decision.
Oh, yeah.
And I would just say today, you have to look at it and say, hey, what is my preferred future? What is the vision God has for my life?
Yeah.
Do I want to sit here being broke 10 years from now?
Yep.
I'm reminded of this terrible show, The Office. It's a terrible show. And Michael Scott, he's rambling off. I think it's a show that is titled Money.
Oh.
He has money problems. And he finds out he might get laid off. And he immediately runs to the bathroom and throws up.
Oh.
Why? Because he's against the fence.
Yeah.
And he's in a terrible relationship where his girlfriend, Jan, is spending all their money. She sold both their cars so she could have a Jaguar by herself or Porsche or whatever it is.
Oh, my word.
So she's spending all the money. And then he ends up saying, but in the future, when I'm retired and I'm with my grandkids and I'm on my yacht, so obviously I did okay. I'm on a yacht.
Yeah.
The gap in that character is he never decided to make the decisions today that could lead to the yacht later, if that's the dream.
It's good.
So decide. Make today the day you decide, not tomorrow. Let it be a catalytic moment.
Yes, that's awesome. And
I
again,
think people have to dream. Like they're not even dreaming. They're not sitting down and if they are married and talking to their spouse and like, what are our dreams?
Yeah.
And so the future is black to them because
Oprah did a series when she started her show. I think it was around 2005 or 6. She called it the debt diet.
Oh.
It's actually one of the reasons that really helped Dave Ramsey get promoted to the bigger, wider audience because she had him on the show during that series. But she said a statement that I think is really powerful. She said a lot of people, because they're so stuck, are just walking through life unconsciously. They make the same decision every day.
Yeah.
They get up, they take the shower the same way, they towel off the exact same way, they wash their hair the exact same way, they eat the same meal, they go through Starbucks every day. They have this habit, and at the end of the day, they didn't change anything.
Yeah.
But when I look back in my life and I say, what allowed me to break free?
Yeah.
It's because I shook up my routine and I decided to stop being unconscious. I just said, I'm going to consciously be aware of every dollar. That I'm going to make George Washington's wooden teeth rattle. I'm going to stretch that dollar bill so far.
That's awesome.
And when you make it, and I'll tell you, a perspective shift for me was recognizing that on the deed for my house, it says that I am the owner of the house. But as a Christ follower, my perspective becomes, I know it says that I'm the owner. And in a physical sense, I am the possessor of that property. But I know reality is I am a manager. That there will be a day I will fade on from this earth. I will. I've been a steward of that house for the period of time God allows me. And so when you realize, hey, I'm managing this for this owner spiritually, it brings a great gravity upon it.
It does.
And when you make a mistake, it's like, God, you chose to bless me with that. And I blew it. And you don't want that feeling too often.
Amen. Amen. That's awesome. So for everybody who's listening, I hope you're encouraged that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
You just have to start. You have to start.
I mean, I think it's clear to be able to share with people, for our household. I was an engineer. My bride was a school teacher. And during that time, I was making about $50,000 a year, and my wife was making $24,000 a year. Okay. So $74,000 household income. I think that's important for people to understand. It wasn't like we were swimming in money. We didn't inherit anything. We were out there. Let me tell you as a testimony, because when you pass a test, you have a testimony. and this fact happened that my bride came home one day from teaching and she said, I think I might be pregnant. Any person who's heard that for the first time, the whole world just like, huh, what, huh, And so we go by the test, and I made her take multiple tests to prove, because I didn't know, it's hard to have a false positive, But we find out we're indeed pregnant, but we knew what that meant, because she had said, I don't want to work. I want to raise the kids. I want to stay home with kids. And so I immediately all the time before that had said, teachers don't get paid enough money. It's such, they don't, and I still believe that. I was just saying that. But when I knew she was pregnant, she's going to quit, I was like, oh my gosh, teachers make so much money. And what are we going to do? And
awesome.
Frankly, to be clear, that's what threw us in the financial ditch.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't change our spending habits. She quit working, and we just kept spending like it was still there. That threw us further in the hole. And so here's what happened. As we got a grip on this money thing, all of a sudden blessings started to show up. In fact, my boss, who did not like me very much, I'm confident he may not like me today. I don't know. I was a little rambunctious, and I do believe I am unmanageable. So sorry, Dave. Sorry. But here's what I know is he had to call me in the office 3 times in the next year and say, here's a pay raise. In fact, the third time, he said, I don't know who you know.
Wow.
I didn't want to give you this, but they're telling me from corporate, I have to give you this.
Oh, my goodness.
Whoa.
And I just sat there and smiled and said, I know who I know.
Yes.
Oh, amen.
And over those 3 raises, it completely replaced my wife's income.
Praise God.
That's awesome. Man.
And so I would just encourage the person.
Yeah.
When you become faithful with the little and obedient with the little, just watch what God will do.
Yep.
Those blessings will show up. They're unexplainable, but they'll become part of your testimony.
Yep. That's awesome.
We're keeping God from blessing us when we're not willing to be obedient to him. And we're missing out. We don't realize it.
Isn't that an interesting perspective? That I don't know if this is true, but I would hate it. I hope this doesn't happen. Lord, please don't let this be true, that we get to heaven and we see all the opportunity we missed out
Oh,
on
man.
because we chose to be disobedient in the moment. I don't want to know
man.
that because I already feel that. I don't
yeah.
want to know it.
Yeah.
I think he's too
Amen.
good to show us that.
Yeah. Heaven's too good to see that.
I haven't
man.
seen any biblical evidence that we're going to be
man.
shown that.
Well, 2 more questions, Joe, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll let everybody know where to find some resources that I know you offer as well. But I didn't give this one to you ahead of time, but I thought about it today. That what are some positives that you've seen in personal finances happening through COVID-19? Like, what are some positive things? Because we kind of focus on the negative, and what do you see positively in the personal finance world coming out of it?
Yeah, a couple things. One is we have seen proven in statistics that when they had this extra unemployment stipend, and we know people made more money than they did working. The vast majority of people saved it.
Wow.
Whoa.
Good.
That's awesome.
That's huge.
In fact, the savings rate is the biggest it has been in more than 50 years.
Whoa.
That's awesome.
That's pretty incredible.
That is incredible.
And I think it's a lot of people saying there's unknowns and we better, I don't know if we're going to get a do-over. I don't know if we're going to get a second hit of this. We need to save.
Yep.
And I think people woke up and realized this thing is not a guaranteed, that our job is not guaranteed. Income is not always guaranteed. Famines show up. They don't announce themselves. They can surprise us always. And so savings has been a great thing. I also think there's a turn in 2013, late 2013, 2014, we felt a shift that the emphasis was no longer on, I need to eliminate my debt. It became focused on investing.
Wow.
The conversation was much more about, I need to know more about investing. And, I know I have some debt, but, my income is rising. I can manage it. I'm focused on investing. The situation is turning around again to go back and focus on, hey, I need to be faithful with every dollar I have, and we have too much debt. We need to get rid of some of this.
That's awesome. Cool. I hadn't heard that about savings, which is great.
It is great.
That's
encouraging.
Well, a lot of people felt like, hey, rent payments. People who were paying rent would just stop because landlords couldn't kick them out. But what the renters knew is that the landlords could accrue the rent, and that the date 6 months later, the landlords would be freed up to kick them out. All that money is due. So it really did support. And I think what's really tremendous between 2008 and 2009 financial crisis and what's happened today is a lot of this money actually went in the pockets of Joe and Mary Sue, American citizen. It just went in their pockets. The last one went to all the big banks. This one actually went in the pockets of Americans. So if we're going to get national debt from it, $3 trillion, hey, at least a bunch of it went in the pockets of Americans who absolutely need it, who did not ask for this. It's something that they couldn't have controlled, and they chose to do something good with what they were given.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, last question I have for you. We've actually challenged our listeners to join Sabrina and I on a 2-month spending fast in October and November. And each person's spending fast might look different from what we're doing, but this podcast will actually air right in the middle, a couple weeks into the spending fast. So we have no idea who's going to join us. It starts October 1.
It may just be us.
It might just be us, but if there are some of our listeners who do join us on this, well, just what are some words of encouragement, support, or advice that you would give to anyone who's doing this challenge along with us?
I would say a couple things. Number one, bully for you. I'm taking a spending fast. That's awesome. It is so challenging to do.
Yeah.
Any type of fasting. As I've shared before, my mother has kind of always struggled with her weight. And so she's been a part of the organization, similar to Weight Watchers, called TOPS, which stands for Taking Off Pounds Sensibly. And once you reach your goal, it's KOPS, K-O-P-S, Keeping Off Pounds Sensibly. It's really become her small group for 50 plus years. Yeah. And there's a diet book that she had. It's called the Dieter's Handbook. She's always had it. Sits in the bathroom. And in it had a line. It said, if you're skinny, don't eat fast. If you're fat, don't eat, period. Fast. Period. And I employ that with the spending thing.
That's good.
And it's if you're doing well with money, don't spend fast. If you're not doing well with money, don't spend fast.
That's awesome.
And so I think that's important that it really gets your attention. Spending fast.
Yeah.
So I say, give up something that is important to you.
That's good.
You won't learn from it if you don't.
That's good.
And the encouragement that I would tell you to do is to start writing it down. You may have never journaled, but write down your feelings.
Yeah.
Your feelings matter.
That's awesome. That's a great
including the angry feelings.
Yeah.
The ones you don't want others to know about your feelings, because this is where you'll learn more about you.
Yeah.
You'll learn what is too close to your heart, how you define yourself. And you'll also learn how you have been living unconsciously, just spending money.
Yep.
And trust me, you may devalue that $3 you spend on coffee, that $7 you spend on lunch every day, that habit of cigarettes that many people still have, that's $5.50 a pack, or I can't even believe that. Oh my goodness. Yeah. But whatever that thing is that's costing you money, you may devalue it. But I'll just remind you, $50 a month for 40 years, that's $588,000 in 40 years.
Wow.
That $25, it's $290,000.
Oh my goodness.
That car payment, $400 a month.
That's a lot.
40 years, it's $4.8 million.
Oh my goodness.
So I just remind you that little amount that you literally thumb your nose at.
Wow.
Is literally probably your ticket to $1 million.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
Let that be your inspiration to say it's worth fasting from.
Yeah.
And hey, you may end up fasting from it for the rest of your life.
Amen. Amen. That's awesome.
Wow, that's
that
really
inspired
good.
me right there.
Yeah, no, me too.
What else can we cut out? That was awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. I think I've read every one of your books, and what I love about I Was Broke and what you offer, it feels like you offer something for every place in the financial journey. Whether it's the I Was Broke Now I'm Not book, which is kind of really focused more on just starting, getting out of debt, budgeting, writing Oxen, which was a huge help in that next level of having money work for you. Your latest book, 2020 Money, is fantastic. I think everyone should read that book and get a vision for your life financially. I think is so good. So anyway, all those resources we'll make sure we put in the show notes with links to. But where can people find those resources? Where can they listen to you, get more information about what you're doing?
That's great. Find everything at iwasbrokenowimnot.com.
Okay.
I mean, we have a blog. We have a lot of resources, books, ebooks.
Podcast.
Link to the Monday Money Tip podcast is there, which is every Monday.
Yep.
And the one thing that I would just tell everybody, there's 3 buckets of where you're at in financial.
Yep.
You're either struggling, you're stable, or you're in surplus. And what I would just say is look at the next stage that's in front of you, because you can't jump from struggling to surplus.
That's awesome.
You just can't do it. And I know that you don't want that anyhow. You want stability.
Yes.
And once you achieve stability for a while, you might feel stuck, and then it's time to start growing and move on to surplus.
That's awesome.
But just take one step in front of the other, one bite size at a time, and learn like the layers of an onion. Your learning is in layers. And step by step, you'll be able to win. We have a bunch of free tools at our website. Go check it out. I'm confident you'll find something there for you.
Cool. And we do encourage you guys to go do that. You have been such a help to us.
Oh, yeah.
We would not be where we are financially without your help and mentorship and leadership. So thank you so much for that. And everybody should go out there. Please go out there and purchase his books. And not just because it's purchasing from Joe, but it's going to help you in your financial journey. I really do believe that. So thank you so much for your time. I know that your time is very valuable, and the fact that you gave us 30 minutes of your time means a whole lot. So thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully this benefits you guys as well. And so we're gonna let you go.
It's an honor.
Yeah.
Awesome, and I'm proud of you guys too. Way to go! Thanks.
See you
Congrats
guys
on the podcast.
Thank you.
Wasn't that incredible? Sabrina and I are still talking about things that Joe said in that podcast that were inspiring to us. I've known Joe for over a decade now. He has spoken so much wisdom and given so much mentorship and leadership into our lives. Sabrina and I would not be where we are financially without Joe. And we are just so pleased to be able to offer that to you. As always, if this has been helpful for you, even if it's not been helpful, we'd love to hear from you, maybe what we can do better. We're trying to do our best here. Reach out to us on social media. Email us hello@jeffmanis.com. And please share, subscribe, rate, review, do all the things for the podcast for us. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, share it. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening from, make sure and subscribe, rate, review, and share it with all your friends. We want to spread the word about what's happening here on the Naked Party Time podcast, where we are getting real and raw. That's what we did today. I don't have my wife here with me to do our marriage mantra, so we'll forego that for today, but we're going to come back in 2 more weeks with a brand new episode for you as well. We're going to be talking about in the next episode what it looks like to have a relational all-terrain vehicle, ATV. We're going to talk about what it takes to get through all of our relationships, being authentic, transparent, and vulnerable. I cannot wait for that podcast. That'll drop in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining us, guys. We will hit you on the other side. Thank you for listening to the Naked Party Time podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review on all of your podcast platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure and subscribe as well. For more content, go to jeffmanis.com.